everybody. This is Dr. Shannan Crawford with 7MCulture, the Unlock You podcast. And this is my dear friend slash mentor, Alisa Jordheim. And she is the founder of Justice Society. And so there's two reasons that I asked her to be on the show with us today. One, I would love for you to just know about the ministry. There's a lot of people who are passionate about the anti-human trafficking space and having a partnership with the Lord and doing their role. And I think hers is really innovative, the dream that God's given her. So I want you to know about Justice Society. Secondly, I would love for you, if you have a dream in your heart, to just be inspired, to grab a cup of coffee, to listen, to be encouraged, and to think, maybe that dream that you've been having or that thought that's been going around your mind or the need that you're seeing, that God might be inviting you into being a part of that answer. So I would love for Alisa to share some of her dream, of how the God dream started. Was it always something in your life? Was God always a part of your story, or was there something that kind of brought all this together? And we'd love to hear some of what God did in your life.
Sure. Well, Shannan, thank you for having me, my friend. We've been friends and walked through a lot of things, so this is great to be able to partner.
Yeah.
And I'm so proud of you. You're doing the same thing you're training about right here. Well, for me, actually, my God journey was very late in life. I was 38. My husband was 40. That's for a whole nother 3 podcasts. So we'll just table that.
We will put a pin in that and ask you to come back.
Put a pin in that. But what I'll say in the work that I'm doing now with Justice Society, it wasn't something really on my radar. I worked in the airline industry, so I'd traveled a lot, I'd seen a lot. It didn't surprise me, but it wasn't really on my radar for work that I would do. So in my case, I actually I'll give you a little bit of history. Is that good?
Yeah, yes.
How it formed. And I want to preface this by saying, not everybody's going to have an angelic visitation. And if you don't, that does not mean you're not supposed to do it. Mine just happened to be a little wacky and crazy, and it was very clear up front. But in my case, I was actually on vacation with my husband, visiting our family farm, his family farm in North Dakota, middle of nowhere. And I had an angelic visitation while I was walking alone in the morning, just in my quiet time. Mind you, Shannan, I wasn't praying about trafficking. I wasn't even on my radar. But in this vision, I saw some experiences of a ship come into port with Asian slaves in it, as well as I saw a dingy room somewhere, I think it was probably India, with a little girl chained to a bed. And as I said, this wasn't something I was studying, I was thinking about anything. So I was completely undone. I'm alone on this road and I'm just weeping and travailing and wailing, and came back home and said to my husband, this just happened. And as my husband says, he says, so what does that mean? And I said, I have no idea. So I'm telling this story to say this part of it was pretty profound. I mean, I was marked, Shannan, right? I didn't know what to do with it. But in my case, I knew the Lord enough that I would seek him in prayer, but it took 1.5 years of me kind of periodically pulsing, like, okay, that thing that happened back there, 6 months ago, 3 months ago, a week ago, then 9 months ago, is that for now? Because he wasn't speaking about it. I wasn't hearing about it. At this time, this was about 10 years ago. This wasn't common conversation. It wasn't in the media.
Right.
And so finally one day, I kind of felt this nudging, like, maybe it's time. And I can't even tell you exactly what the nudging was, just that I knew it's relative to that experience I had, because it wasn't a vision, it was actually an encounter. But I don't know what to do with it. And so as I began to just ask some more, what happened was I knew, you're not saying anything, but I know you're telling me now's the time. So I thought, what do I do? I'm used to hearing the Lord pretty clearly and giving direction. This wasn't that. It was just more like an Elijah, right? Kind of this still small voice. So I started Googling. And this is what I'm encouraging your listeners to do. If you know there's something in your heart, but you don't have the first idea how to do it, or even what's safe, or even what's smart, or if it's even a thing, because I really didn't even know how many people are even doing this. Is this even something, And so I began to look, and the other piece that I think is important is I knew that I wasn't an expert. I knew the Lord. I knew I'd lived enough years to be able to pretty much start anything. because I started a lot of things in my life, but I knew that wasn't this.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't want to do it in my natural strength. I didn't want to do it. I knew God was big enough to kind of lead my path, but it wasn't allowed. Angels with trumpets telling me go right or go left. I had
Mhm.
to walk it out.
Yeah.
I get online and I Google and I take a look and I found a couple organizations. A key for me, which I appreciate your opening with, was finding an organization that was credible in the work that they were doing. Because you can be passionate and
Mhm.
you can have a heart to do it, but if you're not mature and you're not trustworthy in those things, then the best way to do it is to partner with someone who is.
Yes.
Right? Grow up in it, learn about it, find where your gift mix really fits in, and then maybe you can lead down the road. Right? And I'm not
Right.
discouraging anyone to be a leader, but I'm saying, is Jesus not the best servant leader?
Yes.
In the beginning, you kind
Mm.
of learn to serve and lead.
Yeah.
And so I reached out, found a great organization, met with this gal, and she said, well, we're starting one of the things we want to do is start a safe home and then a couple other things. I didn't, Shannon, have any idea how to develop a safe home, but it stirred in my heart. And this was for children who had been trafficked.
Wow.
And so that's what I said yes to. I came home, prayed about it, my husband and I together, and I went back to her and I said, yes, that's my part.
Yeah.
I don't, just up front, I don't have a clue how to do it, but I'm committed to what I can do.
Yeah.
And we talked very clearly about what were my boundaries. Well, how much time did I have? How much commitment was I able to give? All those things that are so important when you're
Mhm.
going to embark on an endeavor, whether you're doing it yourself or partner, as well as whenever you're working with a vulnerable population.
Mm.
Your yes better mean you know how much time, how much commitment at
Good.
the moment. It's always going to shift and change, right?
Mm.
But because this population has trust is a very key element of it.
Mhm.
And so you have to be able to know that your yes is yes, and that's scripture.
Mm.
And so,
Can we highlight that for a second?
please,
I
absolutely.
think that, where there's a lot of zeal without knowledge, we can perish. And so I think sometimes we get really excited about whether it's trafficking or any other cause that we want to get behind. But I love the wisdom and the slow, steady pursuit of the Lord, that you didn't just get a vision and then run after it. You said, okay, Lord, what do you want me to do with that? And then you partnered with something that was already existing and you went as a servant rather than I got a vision from the Lord, like a little bit prideful, but really like, how can I serve what's already out there before the Lord released your own? So I want to just underscore what you're saying for anyone out there that you may feel passion. You can get a vision first, like Joseph, but he may take you through quite a process before you're mature and your character is ready to stand on that height. So please continue. But I thought that was a really excellent point for me as well as everybody else.
Yes. Well, thank you, Shannon. And that's the truth, I think, as well, is that especially if you're endeavoring in new territory, you
Mhm.
have no idea. You think you might have an idea what you said yes to, and you get in and you're like, I am in way over my head. Oh my gosh. Right. And so you have to allow yourself that, especially as I said again, when you're dealing with these are some pretty serious issues you want to be sure you're committed to. I'm going to give you another example, Shannon, that I think it was so was a great experience for me. I worked with the Dallas County DA's office, and what they wanted to do was establish a program where the community came in and supported these kids who were giving testimony in court. Now, I'm talking about a 12-year-old who is sitting on the stand, and her pimp is sitting right in front of her. And all his family is in the courtroom. And she has no one in the courtroom because they're going to have to come in and testify on her behalf later, so they can't be in there. So
Oh,
here she or he is in front of all of this dynamic. So it was very insightful, the DA's office, to say, we really want to get these kids some support. And as mamas and sisters, and we had men on the team who wanted to stand up and say,
yeah.
you better not touch that one. We had to be quiet. It
Mm.
was a court of law. We had to be restrained, and we had to be godly first and foremost, right?
Mhm.
So with that, the reason I'm bringing this one up is that it was fascinating because, again, no idea how to do this. Well, how much did the DA's office want? They didn't know us. I worked on a task force with the DA at the time, and she talked about it, and it was assistant DA. She was over trafficking, and I went to her and I said, I think a friend and I can take this endeavor. What do you want? What do you want this to look like? And she pretty much said, I have very few parameters. I'm not sure. You guys go get the vision and come back and we'll dialogue. But here's what I want to say, Shannon. This was very, what's the word I'm looking for? This was very serious in that we were privy to information
Mhm.
that was relative to court cases. Now, mind you, the assistant TA didn't divulge information she couldn't,
Mhm.
but we had to be very cautious and mature in what we were doing. So she took a big risk in allowing us to come in, bring the general public in,
Mm.
and that it would support her case. Because mind you, a lot of times the judges would say, and who are you? And sometimes she would introduce us, and other times, if she wasn't handling the case, but one of her assistants was, we would stand up. And so, what it took was it took years and years of trust being built up so that a lot of our team wanted to help the girls and their families and was ready, but the
Mhm.
DA had a mission. And that was this case, and to present this case and support this child and family in any way they could, in a way that we had to come alongside, even though, man, we knew there was so much more we could do, but we had to establish trust. We had to serve again. We had to serve the DA's office well and these children well. And then in time, and I'm talking years, and I like to move fast. I'm a mover, and you're
Yeah.
talking about the longevity. It is all I can do to
Mhm.
do longevity. I'm like, let's go. So it's learning that balance. But after that
Mhm.
time, we then developed such a trusted relationship that we were able to assist the children some more directly because we had built and established that. Because imagine the
Yeah.
DA was allowing the general public in, one of these children were to get hurt.
Mm.
Yeah.
Close that door.
So, so that's just another testimony of moving into kind of a new arena and
Mm.
allowing things to unfold that you maybe don't know how to do,
Yeah.
but allowing yourself to serve first, so that
Yeah.
you've proven yourself as trustworthy before you're given faithful with little, faithful with much.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
I'd love to underscore that point as well. I think that when we see injustice, especially at this scale, humans usually have one or
Children.
two,
Oh,
right? We either shut down or we get really emotional. And depending on personality, that might be a lot of tears and depression. And then we want to shut down and we don't want to go there. Or we get really angry and indignant and we feel the right to be offended. And so out of this moral injustice, then we become very entitled and we can actually step on and close more doors and end relationships in our entitled fury instead of the wisdom to slowly build relationship and allow equity to speak for you rather than trying to come in it like I've got all this emotion and this passion. And there's people who've been toiling in this space for a lot longer than the person that's new at it. And so I love the tact and the wisdom and the graciousness to know that you're fighting a long game and not just the immediate gratification of I am part of a solution and an answer and I'm going to stand up for those who can't, but I'm going to come as a servant, knowing that a lot of times the people in this space are weary and they're tired and they're burnt out and they're underpaid. Like a DA probably is not the most glamorous job. And then we come in with our entitlement and our little pride and attitude. That's more likely going to make their job harder. And then they're going to be able to defend and protect those young people even less effectively, rather than how can I undergird, support what you're already doing and partner with that. So I love the way that you link arms in a way that's very honoring of the other person, even though it's a space where it would be very easy to be emotional. And I'm sure you do at certain points, but you don't do it in the public space. You're trying to make sure that you're connecting human to human. And I've watched that over years and have always admired that about you, Alisa.
oh, thank you, Shannon. Appreciate that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So what happened next in the God adventure? So you're helping with the DA, you're serving at the safe house.
Yep, yep. So helped establish a safe house and then working with the girls. And that was a period of time, a lot learned in that time. Again, you think you know what's best, but when you're working with a population that's been highly traumatized, and the first thing you want to say is, let's get you into college. And the first thing she says is, I want a supersized meal. You know,
Yeah.
you just, you what
Yes,
are
yes.
things that will bless them? What are things that they
Yeah.
value in a given
Practical.
space? Right, exactly. And we of course see the glory of their identity, but it's a
Mhm.
process, and it's honoring that and letting them find their way in a safe space. And that being the key is you have to be a safe space. So I learned more from the girls than they ever learned from me, but a lot of adventures, a lot of laughs, a lot of crying, and so that lasted for good number of years where I work directly with the girls. And then I've stepped out of that and don't do that so much. But what I do find is that I have a lot of national and international connections from all the work I've done. So, like others you've interviewed, I'm very passionate about being able to connect organizations. I still get calls, emails, all kinds of things from people who will say, my aunt, this happened to my niece, or, oh, we've got somebody here in Tennessee. Do you, is there a safe home? So I'll connect and I'll say, okay, let me reach out to a few contacts I have, do a lot of that. As well as just last week, I got 2 emails from young ladies. One who is working as a personal chef, who wants to work in this industry either, and she recognizes she might have to volunteer to start, but in this industry, maybe in a safe home. And so I said, hey, here's the reality of it. First off, I don't know you.
Mhm.
And I'm certainly not going to recommend you, an environment like this. So let's get to know each other a little. Let's have some dialogue. And she happened to know someone I knew in the community she lives in. And I said, she's a great referral. Why don't you get a referral from her? Let's go from there. She just got this referral, sent it. So now we're going to have another conversation, this young lady and I, and then I'm going to start connecting her. Now, I'm not guaranteeing her anything,
Right.
but I'm saying, love your passion. And
Mhm.
Shannan, let me go back to that, because this is something I really learned, was that I spoke a lot at universities. I've written a book on the subject, and a number of them have used it as curriculum. And what I found in the beginning was, because we are so passionate about this issue, when you're talking children being sex trafficked, there's not much more that all of us can say, we agree, this is just wrong. And particularly, I'd say millennial and Gen Z, your younger generation, you are so justice minded, and it
Mhm.
is the hand of God, and it is beautiful.
Mhm.
And so I would speak, and then I would have all these kids come up after and say, I want to do something, I want to help.
Yeah.
And I had a number of projects I was working on, or things that they could connect to. So I would kind of say, okay, you can do this. Well, I learned quickly that if they were doing something that I'm passionate about, not necessarily going to be their passion. The overarching issue is, but
Mhm.
maybe the lane that they've been placed into isn't.
Good.
So what I found was, and it didn't bring success for me, but more importantly, Shannon, I'm going to keep going.
Yeah.
It didn't bring success for them.
Yeah.
And that's key. At that age, when you're excited, you want to have successful
Mhm.
opportunities to learn and to grow and to say, I can do this. So, what I learned was that I began to say, I appreciate that you're asking me what you can do, but I'm gonna lob it back to you, as in tennis. I'm gonna lob it back to you, and I'm gonna say, what are you passionate about? Are you an artist? Are you a writer? Are you getting a counseling degree? What is it that you're
Mhm.
passionate about?
That's good.
And let's use that right now
Mhm.
to in any way connect you to it, because you might not have, if you're in college, you're either undergrad or graduate degree, you're pretty busy. So how much
Mhm.
time do you have? What is it that you're already passionate about? So
Mhm.
being able to then say, let's use what you have, which is something you always do with the girls, unless it's something that's harmful to them and you have to tell them, this is how we're going to do it. More
Mhm.
times than not, what you want to do is offer some options, because these kids need options, right? They
Mhm.
need to learn to critical think and make decisions with consequences.
Uh-huh.
Same thing, I think, with anyone who wants to volunteer, is let's process through this and find the best fit for you so that you can successfully do it. Being an at-home mom with 5 kids who really wants to do something, you're not going to go
Yes.
work in a safe home. Let's find you what fits for you. So
Yeah.
that's been very successful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I love the freedom and the open-handedness you've had. I see sometimes people get really passionate and then it's like everybody has to do what I'm doing because that's my
Mhm.
passion and that's what I see God doing. And so there can be a little bit of like almost on accident shaming if other people are not doing what they're doing. But I think it belies such a trust that you have in the Lord that it's okay that there's space for people to have a different angle or a completely different mission or calling, and they don't need to do what you're doing, but you're going to help develop them if you're called to do that,
Sure.
to help them figure out what is the angle that you're called to do, and it could be something completely different than you, and that's not threatening, or you're not trying to manipulate or control people or build this army around Alisa. You're saying let's all find the sweet spot that the Lord has created us
Mhm.
for, and then link arms and connect. And a big part of what we want at 7M Culture is that we are connecting, that we are not lone wolves, And one of the most dangerous things I've seen in years of working with people in therapy is this I hear from God. All I need is me and God. I don't need to go to church. I don't need friends. I don't need community. It's just this solo little avenger person. And it's really unhealthy because in Ecclesiastes, it says it's better that two walk together. If one fall, the other one can pick us back up. And you
Yeah.
can't say that you love your heavenly father if you can't love your brother. So there's so many passages throughout scripture woven in about the need for community and not forsaking meeting together with the brethren. And so I love that you've done that. You are the most not build your own empire person I've ever met. Like, it's just beautiful. Like,
I want to stay that way because you have to manage an empire. And I have to laugh because you were talking about Ecclesiastes, and I've never said this before. But I'm going to say it now. I'd say if the Bible could be added to, it would probably be the book of Dr. Phil, which would be, and how's that working for you? Yeah. I mean, you just want to say, yeah,
mm-hmm.
build your own empire. How's that working for you?
Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
going to work for you. But I think, and anybody who's listening, sometimes we have that, and the Lord's even convicted me at times.
Oh, yeah.
And so, if that's something that ever comes up where you're like, I want to build this thing, and the noun continues to be I, then
Mhm.
you know that there's something in you that probably wants to feel special. You probably want to feel important, seen, known, valuable, that you have something to offer. So, my encouragement in the unlock part of this adventure of your life is that, like people like Alisa, who's not perfect, she's got stuff that she's been working on for years, but she's willing to let God do the deep work so that when she's in her mountain of influence and she's leading Justice Society, I can say for somebody who's known her maybe 10 plus years, she is not building her own kingdom. She's not manipulating or strong arming anybody into following what she's doing because she's so convinced that the Father is leading this vision and this call that then she gets to platform and connect and empower and bless people into their thing. So I would just proactively say if anybody's out there and you find yourself saying I a lot, my vision, my dream, my calling, my, odds are good there's a place in your heart that is really important to the Lord that he would love to minister to make sure that you know it's solidified on the inside that you're important irrespective of what you do or don't do in your calling. And so Alisa, how did you kind of develop the next step of building the ministry that now has so helped so many people?
Yeah, well, so after that, after this, the working directly with the kids, that's when you have to, transition, right? Like, where are we headed? What does this look like? Well, in my case, the Lord very clearly had said, I want you to write a book. And Shannan, I I'm not that gifted a writer. It's just real, it's kind of like Moses, where he said, "What? Are you picking the right guy?" And I said, "Lord, why? I'm going to ask you, if, please show me the value in it."
Mm,
Because I have read almost every book out there on this issue, and we don't need one more, I don't think.
mm,
And he was very clear and gave me an outline. And it was really quite beautiful because I knew by the time the outline was done, one of those God moments when you look at it and you go, that was not even me.
mhm,
Okay, this is the
mhm.
hand of God. I'm going to say yes. So it was just this beautiful adventure. And I was still working with the kids somewhat in this time, but in this case, it's five true stories based on how children were groomed to be trafficked, and they were all unique stories and unique grooming criteria.
Mm. And they're
And
all American, isn't that right?
yes, made in the USA. Thank you, Shannan.
Mhm.
And that's pretty key, I think, is that people see how it happens in America. And
Mm.
so in this case, I knew that the stories had to be written in the first person. Well, if anybody who's even read enough first person books, the same person can't write five stories, or it will sound like the same person in every story.
Uh-huh.
So I thought, how do I even do this? And sought some wise counsel. And I ended up partnering with five young writers. These were all women that I knew, and one male, because there's one male story in it. They were all women that I knew, that I trusted, that I knew were mature. And I reached out to them and I said, this is the endeavor. The profits, the proceeds are going to go toward, we're not profiting from this endeavor.
Mhm.
Um, will you, I've done the interviews, I already have the survivors, I have their testimonies, I have all of that. It's in audio file. Would you be willing to write a first person story with this story? And I give you lots of liberty, but there are criteria for the book. And it was a beautiful venture because we as a team, each went off and wrote their own story that I gave them the audio to. But I took it back to the publisher, you know, and I got it. And he said, well, how did you do this? And I told him, he said, you what? That was so hard. And I'm like, and it's a good thing I didn't know how hard. I mean, I knew nothing. And that was good because it was a labor of love. But it was beautiful, Shannan, because these 5 writers who are glorious in their own right got to take the story, got to commit to that, got to help a survivor in that. And I'm going a little long, so I'm gonna get back.
You're not. I want to hear it.
Okay.
Can I put a link of the book on
Yeah, please.
at the bottom? Okay, I'll do that.
Absolutely. Love that. And so each one, then we get on these calls, and I got a young editor as well who was coming and working with me. And so she and I would, there were 2 of them actually, the 3 of us would get on a call with each writer, and we'd get on for like an hour, hour and a half, and read their first 10 pages. And we'd be like, okay, this is what we're seeing, you know. And the writers had to be humble enough, because when you're a gifted writer, it's your baby, right? It's their style. And they had to be humble enough to be told, we have 30 pages. That's the maximum you have to tell this whole story. And we have to be sure the key elements are being highlighted. And I did say all of that up front. And so they had to be humble. We had to be humble. We had to really partnership and work on this. Took a year to do that part of it. And then it was just beautiful. And then we had this fun, as you know, book party after, and some of the survivors came, and we just had such a great time. And we were not there to talk about trafficking. We were there to celebrate those who were willing to tell their stories, and just celebrate that there is always a good hope and a future in this issue. And then after that, Shannan, what I did was, this is pretty key, I think, was decided this really should be an audiobook. My publisher actually came back and said, have you considered? And I hadn't. And then working with someone a little bit, created it into an audiobook and read it myself. And I say that because you can hire somebody to read, or you can read. And she and I really dialogued through it. And she said, I think because you're a speaker, you should read your own book.
Yeah.
Because once you speak, people are then going to go listen to your audiobook and then say, who is this reading it? And so it was so fun. And I say fun, it was difficult, but it was fun, because now you have first person stories where there are pimps and there are Johns and there are kids and all of these personalities. It's like I got an acting class in my closet with a microphone. You know what I mean? One time I took cotton and I stuck it in my mouth to do, you know, Pimp J every time I do this character. And so, and I want to say this, there are going to be some that are listening, because this is a very heavy subject, that might say, how can they be laughing at this? Let me tell you, Jesus is fun. And if you cannot find joy, even working in the darkest places, you need to regroup, and you need to recalibrate, and you need to make sure you're equally yoked.
That's so
because
good.
You said this is a long game, Shannan.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, there have been times I have just wept all night. And there are just times when you can laugh and talk about a pen, because it's a reality, you know. And I'll tell you, I'm in it for the long game. And because I know that, what did Paul say? He said, you run the race well. And that means anybody can start.
Yeah.
You and I have actually had this conversation. Anybody can start well. But can you finish well?
That's
and
so
that's what
good.
Paul talks about. You have to learn to finish well.
Yeah.
So going back, laughed a lot about it, had a great learning experience. And now I'm working on a book with an octogenarian, which is an 85-year-old PhD out of Liberty University. And we're writing a book on pornography. Shannan, we've been talking about this book for a long time, but we're actually in the process of writing it. I go work with her next week.
That's awesome.
So you're talking about the generations. It is so cool to be working with a woman who has seen, she's 85, she has sharp as a tack, and she has seen things that I will never see or understand. So she understands how we got here, right? How we are in this place kind of sexually in a culture where pornography is not only normal, but like pushed on us, pushed on 5-year-olds, and you know, all these things are kids being trafficked. So this partnership, for myself as well as with the younger generation and all that, partnerships are the best thing you can do, but they also take a lot of work. And I mean that in a good way, because I am learning, she's learning from me. The way I might speak or want to do it isn't the way she knows to do it. So it's just this coming together and finding you called it the sweet spot, but I'll say the tapestry
It's
of
good.
not making it yours and not making it look
Mhm.
like how it
Yeah.
needs to be. But when you work with the older, the younger, as we come together, we have to be willing to say, let's see what God's up to
Yeah.
as He's marrying this, because it will look different than if I would have done it alone or you would
Yeah.
have done it alone.
So
Yeah.
good.
So
So
cool.
good. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
And I want to
So,
go back to the point you made about if people are watching going, how could they be laughing at this?
yeah.
Well, first, we were not laughing at the subject matter, but I think that the joy of the Lord is our strength. And
Oh,
sometimes when we carry a burden, it can be a God burden, it can be something that He's given you and you are called into that space, but we can carry it without realizing it. And so then we lose our joy. We become very stoic and self righteous and indignant, and we can develop a religious spirit without realizing it. And so that was a great point of how you have stayed so fresh and so full of the presence of Holy Spirit that you just ooze his joy. You ooze the fruit of the Spirit. And
I'm
so
glad.
I've watched you, I'm sure, carry a burden and then have to release it, carry it and then release it back. And so I think that's that emotional maturity of being able to recognize what am I feeling? And then stewarding it in the presence of the Lord and healthy relationship, journaling, whatever you need to do to gain clarity of what am I feeling? Where is this coming from? And many times, for me, as well as anyone listening, that could also trigger something in your own life. So when you feel that you keep ruminating and you can't move off of something and you get highly offended if somebody has a reaction that you don't like or appreciate, and you can't just go, oh, that's them, that's where they're at, and I can be somewhere else. If you take that really personal, odds are good it's hitting a trigger inside of you. And again, you want to make sure you're bringing that in the presence of the Lord so He can heal, redeem, and cleanse that. So then a scar can't be triggered. A scar becomes a testimony where He has been faithful and you've allowed Him to cleanse that wound, versus just scabbing it, denying it, suppressing, burying, and then trying to overcompensate with this thing you're going to do in this mission. And I'm going to make sure justice happens and blah, 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 which may even be your own latent grief and anger stage because you haven't worked through your own pain. And so then now we make people today pay for the sins of the past. And so part of your own litmus test of your health is how much time am I giving to stewarding my own soul, especially if you're in a heavy calling of any kind, because it will hit on some of our own stuff and our own humanity. And so that does need to come up. It needs space and margin in your life for the Lord to have opportunity. He's a gentleman, right? So He'll knock on the door, but you have to actually sit down, process, and be
Yeah.
there with Him.
Yeah.
Otherwise, He's, blinds are closed, the door's closed, and He doesn't have permission into that space. So I love what she was saying about the emotional maturity of going through nights where she is crying, but then also still having joy in the morning, not continuing to carry that burden, even though she is in dark, dark places. So, Alisa, can you share some of the covert things, if you don't mind? I mean, I know that some of what you do is kind of secretive in a good way, in like a covert Jesus ninja way. So I want to respect that. But if there's
That's
any,
why I'm wearing all black. I got my ninja on.
I
And
should
I'm
have worn
ninja.
black. Whatever you feel comfortable sharing. I think it's so fun to just see how the Lord leads you on some of these missions with Justice Society.
Yes.
And I'm putting her on the spot, so give
Yeah,
me.
and that's okay, right? They can see that. I'm trying to figure what should I say, what should I not say? We do quite a few prayer assignments that are pretty covert. And when we might say covert, people might think, well, how covert can you be in prayer? Well, sometimes we're going to places that wouldn't allow you in, wouldn't allow us in. So we're maybe not going as Christians to pray. We're going some other places. We're going to some pretty dark places where some pretty high level occult things have happened and different things like that. So, and that's important because I know that a part of my assignment, not that it's important for everybody else to do that, right? Some people are called to do the street work.
Mhm.
Some people are called to do the prayer work, and we're all called as prayers. There's no excuse, right? If you're on the street and you're like, well, I am not called to pray, then you better get your Bible back out. Because we're all called to pray to some degree, and we all prophesy, and it's all of ours to do. But in my case, I know that a part of my anointing and my assignment is to do some pretty strategic prayer. And so I think I'll leave it at that, Shannan, just that we do have a team that we do that, and we're very specific about that. But some of the other things that I would say are covert are, I still do quite a bit of work with legislation. I worked with the Texas School Board of Education, and actually, how are we on time? You want a little story?
I want to hear it. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to bring it on. This was a fascinating case. So a friend of mine has been working with the, this was just, a couple months ago. She's working with the, getting curriculum written for the Texas state. Texas has not updated their curriculum for like 10 plus years, maybe longer, their school curriculum. And I found that shocking. It had no, at least a major overhaul. It had no human trafficking element in it at all.
Wow.
And so she said they are looking, the School Board of Education, who are not experts in this area, right? They're educators, are looking to present this, create it, develop it, present it, and then it's going to go to print. And she said, would you be willing to speak into the human trafficking component of it? And I thought, I had a lot on my plate at the time, and I was like, tell me what that entails. How much, what are we talking? What, and she said, it's actually happening now, and it needs to be done pretty quick. And I said, well, tell me what this is. And I recognize this is too important not to. This is our children. This is their education. So she was presenting to me to do this. And I knew this is completely beyond my scope, as well as, yes, I have expertise in this area, but we're talking about all of Texas. These are some of the rural communities as well as the cities. And I've lived in cities the whole time I've been in Texas. And I am going to close my mail so that it doesn't open on us here, Shannan. And so I said, here's what I'm thinking. I said, I have enough connections all over the state. What I'd like to do is I would like to get members who are, our case believers. So we were pretty covert, but I knew who would be going with that mindset to create this curriculum. So what I said is, what I'd like to do is, they don't have to accept what you recommend. Yeah. And we would be considered SMEs, subject matter experts, but they don't know us, these school board members, right? So are they really going to rely on what we have to say? So what I did is I said, I'd like to get someone, at least one person from the north, the south, the east, and the west. So we represent all of the state of Texas, very coming together as subject matter experts. Here is our recommendation. Here are our bios, so that they collectively knew that a team of subject matter experts representing the entire state came together. Shannan, that was a God idea.
That is so kingdom.
What I said, that is so you, Jesus. Thank you. So I reached out to all these different friends, and we got members from all the area, as well as some men, some women, all working in the trafficking arena, and put together our recommendations for them. And it took a lot. We did a lot of calls, Zoom calls, working together, taking parts, coming together, finally got it collectively put together. Then we found out that we had a 3-minute ability to speak to the school board. And when I say we, I mean every single person in the state of Texas that wanted to tell the school board about something that they were creating. So it was like a 48-hour period, probably more like 36, that the School Board of Education had to sit in front of Zoom and listen to one 3-minute segment after one 3-minute segment.
Oh my gosh, that sounds
every topic. They were, by the grace of God, they just even survived that. So I knew after, I was like 3/4 of the way through the day, like 8 hours in was my 3 minutes. And then my girlfriend was like 2 hours after me or whatever. And I knew there's not value in this 3 minutes. I'm going to do it. And, God can anoint it, but they are exhausted. Yeah. So how do we effectively let them know? So my friend kind of went in and told her folks. And so I'm reaching out as much as I can. I'm emailing them this, a couple of us, nothing. They have their board meeting. They do it. They don't adopt anything. Nothing's done. And I'm at this time living both in Seattle and San Antonio, going back and forth. It was just kind of crazy. So I'm still saying, even though I'm here in Seattle right now, I've got to make sure that I'm available for any of this that's happening. So as it was not picked up the first time around, I thought, okay, well, we've done what we can do. Well, I reach out again to my San Antonio representative, who's this young gal who's worked for CPS, Child Protective Services. I'm telling a long story, Shannon, to
I want to
say
hear it. Yeah.
this is how you don't have to work with the godly ones. You don't have
Uh-huh.
you work with those who are passionate. And
Mhm.
I knew, having watched these meetings, she's passionate, she's articulate, and
Mm.
she's willing to speak out.
Yeah.
So I thought,
Good.
and we're not presenting this. That was another piece I do want to tell this. What I did was, as I established this team, I said, here's the deal, guys. This is not, we're not presenting this as Christians.
Uh-huh.
We are presenting this as subject matter experts. So
Mhm.
you leave your Jesus in everything you write,
Mhm.
but you leave him in it, but right here,
Yeah.
right? Right.
Yeah.
That's not what we're presenting. So you
Yeah.
have to know your audience.
Yeah.
Jesus is with you every minute of every day.
Mhm.
He's in all of you that you do. So,
Yeah.
so when we did that, I reached out to her before the final. This was almost like 3 or 4 months later after we presented. It had not been picked up, all of this. I didn't know it, but my friend said they're going to do one final edit on this other version. I'm like, oh my, and then they're gonna go to print. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I reached out to my gal and she reached out to me, and we're on different time zones going back and forth. And she literally, the day before they're going to go into the meeting, I think, well, she's not picking it up either. That, we've done what we can do. We bless it. Maybe they will and we don't know it. She reaches out to me via text and she says, I want to adopt everything that you guys, almost. There was one thing they didn't. I want to adopt it. Can you send it to me? I'm like, I had other things going that day. It was crazy. And I'm like, when do you need it by? She said, by tonight. And I said, okay. So I send her something and she says, it doesn't coordinate with the whole new way they've written it. Can you look at it? So I look at it and all this stuff. So the next morning, my friend texts me and she says, she's presenting all your proposals as a team right now. I said, how do you know that? She said, it's this link. She sends me the link and I'm watching it. So then I get a text while she's presenting and she's asking me questions. So I'm texting her back and I'm like, I'm going to send it to you now. So she's presenting all of our proposals the best she can. And we are coordinating, Shannon, up to the 11th hour.
Wow.
And it got adopted. I was like, Jesus, I am
That's so
astounded.
fantastic.
Is that the coolest story? So these are all of these people who have a heart to serve this community. And hear me, what we would have wanted to do was a much, much more than we were able to present, because what we knew was they couldn't have all these changes. They had to implement this human trafficking component in a whole huge overhaul. So like you so wisely said, is we had a whole lot more in our ideal situation that we would have really suggested, but we had to use wisdom and say, this is what we know they can say yes to. Otherwise, they're going to say no to everything.
Yeah.
Right. And we know Jesus can bring it in, but
Yeah.
just use wisdom. So now our team has some cred with the School Board of Education, right? Anytime we can step in and help.
So
I was just thinking about her this morning. I'm going to reach out to that rep again and say, gosh, are you working with students in the classrooms? Is there any, do you maybe want to come in and do some training, or find somebody in the community that does do that, or already works with the schools? Because we have some relationship and some credibility. Crazy story. So good. So that's not covert, but it is a little covert. I mean, this is that
Absolutely. And
very
it makes me
particular.
think of David, how he prayed each time he went to battle because the Lord recommended a different battle plan, a different strategy. And so I think you're illustrating to not just move in presumption of do what he did last time. So sometimes he may ask us to be like, Jesus. And then sometimes it might be a little bit more like CIA covert ops.
Yes.
And so each time being open to the discovery of what he's leading each time, and then to see the home run when you do follow it out and it's like not working, not working, not working. And then he comes through in such an extravagant way that it's like, that was only the Lord that he positioned
Only the Lord.
that
Yeah.
connection. They ran with it. So I want to have you on again because there's
Love
so many
to.
more stories that I'm like geeking out about. I adore you.
I love my geek friend. Let's do it.
Alisa in my life was one of the first people who really emulated walking with Holy Spirit just moment by moment, and has been such a pivotal person in my life. And I can vouch for her of 10 plus years of watching her, the inside and outside of her public life and personal life. So if you want to connect with her and Justice Society, they do a lot of really cool ninja stuff, Jesus stuff, not literally ninja, that's an expression. But they're so cool. And they are behind the scenes doing a lot of strategic prayer. And they go to regional places where in the spirit realm, the enemy has legal territory. And so they're breaking it up. Some other people are, again, called to the streets. They do the, boots on the ground part. And then this team is doing a different side. So it's kind of like all of the military branches starting to collaborate and work together. So we'd love for you to connect with Justice Society. And then the Made in the USA book, I would love to put a link so that people know about that as a resource. And any teachers out there, communicators, if you have a nonprofit or an organization, we would love to make sure that we get this in your hands, because we do want to make sure Americans know this is not just in Thailand and far away in the movie Taken. This is something that's happening in Plano, Texas. We just had several people busted recently. I live in Texas, so it's like I hear all the local stories and it's just frightening. And that's just my little area. That's all over the US. So thank you, Alisa, for being with us. We honor your life and your commitment and your long game vision to stay the course. Thank you. And we love you guys, and we'll see you for our next episode. Bye.
Bye now.